Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy Edit. Today's video, I'm bringing you guys a 10-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot on Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard. I'm going to be talking about my picks as well as the picks around me and my overall strategy throughout the entire draft. Now, we're doing this on Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard, so we're going to be drafting up against the computer to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. The roster positions for this 10-team PPR mock draft are 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wideouts, a tight end, flex, kicker, defense, as well as 6 bench spots. In this video, we're going to be drafting up against NFL.com pre-draft rankings to get a good idea of what it would be like on NFL.com, and I hope that you guys do end up enjoying this. Now, you don't necessarily have to follow along just for the picks I'm making. It's more about the player analysis that I talk about at every pick and my thought process between the multiple players that I end up looking at before I end up making my picks. Like I said, 10-team PPR mock draft from the first overall spot. Now, before I get into the mock draft, I'd like to ask you guys, could please go down below and hit that subscribe button. It's free, and I put out content every single day to help you guys win that 2020 Fantasy Football Championship. This is the 3rd video of today, so if you missed the other 2, please make sure to check that out after this video is done. And if you're new, please hit that subscribe button. Also, check out my Patreon for my draft guide if you need help drafting, as well as in-season content is going to go on there as well, stuff that you may need during the season to help you guys out even further dominate your league. So let's get into this mock draft. Now, we're at the 1 spot, which is probably my least favorite spot in the whole draft. Now, obviously, you get that big prize of Christian McCaffrey. You're getting the best player in fantasy football, the guy that's a running back and wide receiver molded into 2, but in the 2nd round, in the 3rd round, that's when you really start to feel the pain of being the first overall pick. Now, it's not as tough in a 10-team league, but in a 12-team league, it feels barren at the 2nd and 3rd round. So that's why I don't prefer to pick at the first pick. I'm more of a guy that prefers the middle to the end of the 1st round when I am personally picking in drafts. So like I said, we're at the 101. To me, this is a no-brainer. I'm going with Christian McCaffrey. I think Saquon Barkley could rival CMC for being the #1 guy at the end of the year. I could see that happening 100%. But to be the safest, Christian McCaffrey is going to see over 100 targets. He's probably going to get 1,000 rushing yards, probably going to get 1,000 receiving yards. So it's just a lock that he's going to be great, even no matter who the quarterback is to the Panthers. The quarterback's better now, so it should be even easier. But it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter who the coach is. Christian McCaffrey is a fantasy football god sent down from the fantasy football heavens. Christian McCaffrey is legitimately unfair on your team. He destroyed the other opponent single-handedly last season. So that's why he's going at the 101, and I will happily draft him here, but I will not argue against anyone who wants to go who wants to go Saquon Barkley. But in my opinion, I would go Christian McCaffrey pretty much 100% of the time. I think that he is going to be the best player in fantasy football to have drafted at the 101. So after we went with CMC at our first overall pick, which is pretty much predetermined before you go into the draft, don't be that asshole who's sitting there for 2 minutes trying to make their pick. You know what you want. You want Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley. After I went with CMC, Saquon came off the board, followed by Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, CEH, Derrick Henry, and Kenyon Drake close out the 1st round. Now, the confusion with Alvin Kamara right now is probably at a minimum. It was at a maximum yesterday. There was reports Alvin Kamara's ass is getting traded. This, that, and the other thing. Alvin Kamara wants $1 zillion. He wants Christian McCaffrey money, and he still does. I personally believe that they will pay him. I am personally not really fading him at his average draft position as around the 3rd or 4th pick of the draft. I think he plays, and if he was to get shipped off, I assume he will be pretty much identical, maybe slightly worse than in New Orleans, but I think he'll still be fine. But in my personal opinion, I don't think he's going anywhere. In the 1st round, we saw 2 wide receivers come off the board. The rest were running backs, very typical for fantasy football drafts this year. The running back position is key in the 1st round. That's why people are loading up on him. That's why CMC is the 1st pick of the draft. If you guys remember years prior, if you guys have been playing fantasy football for a while, a couple of years ago, Antonio Brown was the 1st pick in a lot of leagues, but things have changed recently, and running backs have become such a premium because the wide receiver position is super deep this season. After Kenyon Drake closed out the 1st round, the 2nd round began with Joe Mixon, followed by Austin Eckler, Julio Jones, Miles Sanders, Tyreek Hill, Josh Jacobs, Travis Kelce, Nick Chubb, and George Kittle. Same amount of wide receivers end up going inside of the 2nd round, but we did see both of the big 2 tight ends fall off the board, bang, bang, pick 207 and pick 09 with Travis Kelce and George Kittle. The order that those 2 guys go is going to be different in every league. Some leagues it'll be Kittle first, other leagues it'll be Kelce first, but those are the top 2 tight ends going off the board in every single league. I've never once seen anyone go ahead of Travis Kelce and George Kittle. So very typical first 2 rounds of the draft, really dominated by the running back position with the 2 tight ends going in the second round. Sometimes you see them go in the third round, but they averagely go in the second or the third round. We are soon to see quarterback Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson come off the board as well, since they're typically second and third round picks. Here we start off with Christian McCaffrey, like I said earlier, and now we have to load up on either running back or wide receiver. This is where we have to make a decision. Do we want to draft a running back, or do we want to go with the double-headed wide receiver? I personally believe at this pick, unless the running back value falls to you and people are drafting quarterbacks early or more wide receivers early, you're not going to be able to get one of those star-studded running backs in the beginning or at the end of the second round. That's why I personally don't like that first overall pick. So here, the running backs, it's pretty much a hellhole besides Aaron Jones. I'm personally a big fan of Aaron Jones. Now, Matt LaFleur went out there and said, it's not just Aaron Jones. Everyone's going to be involved. He said that shit last year, and Aaron Jones was carrying the team, scoring a zillion touchdowns. And a lot of people are talking about what we would call positive or negative regression, regressing your touchdown total. Okay? And now I hate that word. I hate that argument. But regression, what that means is that his touchdown total is going to go down. Now, even if it went down, he was like number 1 in touchdowns scored. Even if that number goes down, guess what? If it only was like 5 or 6 touchdowns, he's still a top 15 running back. You're finding him in the second round on a team that the Green Bay Packers are now more committed than the run than ever. So I think Aaron Jones here, I'll happily pick here at the end of the second round and then hop onto the wide receiver train since I don't love the rest of the running backs available. So, like I said, we are going to be going with Aaron Jones there. Sorry if my face looked a little bit stupid there. I was scrunching my nose because I had to sneeze, and I sneezed really loud, so I obviously edited that out. So now we're going to hop onto the wide receiver train with our team beginning with Aaron Jones and Christian McCaffrey. Now, obviously here, you could go Mahomes, you could go Lamar, you could go Mark Andrews, but I'm personally not about hopping on the quarterback train here in the third round, and I think it's a little too early in the third round to go with Mark Andrews, so I'm going to go ahead and hop on the wide receiver train. A lot of people are very high on D-Hop, and I get it. I understand it. He'll probably finish as a top 5 wide receiver, but in the past, we have seen struggles with wide receivers going into the first year with a new team. These star-studded wide receivers kind of struggling in the first year with that new team. Now, it doesn't mean DeAndre Hopkins is bad. It might just mean that the connection isn't quite there with Kyler Murray. Now, it should not be hard at all for DeAndre Hopkins to feast with a bad quarterback because he has done it in the past. And I shouldn't even say Kyler Murray's bad because I think Kyler Murray's very good, but a quarterback he's not accustomed to, I should say. But DeAndre Hopkins has played with, I think, 7 quarterbacks in his NFL career and has absolutely feasted with all of them. So I understand why some people might have him ranked ahead of Chris Godwin, but I personally love Chris Godwin. I think Tom Brady loves Chris Godwin. I think it is going to be a love affair in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady's Tampa Bay. I think Chris Godwin is going to have a fantastic year eating like Ezekiel Elliott in Tampa Bay. So I'm going to go with Chris Godwin and draft him this year. I loved him last year, and I'll happily hop back on the train in the third round of the draft. Now, obviously, we're going to fast forward into the fourth round. It will be a while in your real draft before you make that pick, so make sure you have something ready to drink, ready to eat, so that you're in the right mood to make your next pick of the draft. So after we went ahead and selected Mr. Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as well as Aaron Jones on that turn pick, we saw DeAndre Hopkins come off the board, followed by Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes to start off the third round. So like I said, not very surprising since the quarterbacks typically go around the second and third round turn. After that, we see DJ Moore come off the board, followed by Chris Carson, Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, and Odell Beckham Jr. to close out the third round of this draft. The fourth round begins with Adam Thielen, followed by Juju Smith-Schuster, Melvin Gordon, James Conner, Todd Gurley, A.J. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Amari Cooper, and David Johnson. So we really see the third and fourth round heavily dominated by the wide receiver position, which I expected. That's where the running backs really start to not get picked as much because there's a lot of worries inside the third and fourth round, especially the fourth round. There's the wide receivers that have been good the running backs that have been good in the past. They're your throwback picks. These are guys that were fire a couple of years ago, and now they're looking a bit risky. They're looking a bit dangerous like Baker Mayfield, so you're not sure what to do. That's why a lot of people just draft the running backs early, and that's why I am on the train of drafting your running backs early, so you feel much safer going into the middle rounds because there's a lot of great wide receivers still available. Some picks I like out of that group, I love Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, I feel like, is going to be fantastic in Indianapolis. I just feel like he is going to become the starter. I feel like there's no way that within the first 4 weeks of the season that Marlon Mack is still toting the rock more than Jonathan Taylor. And behind the number 1 offensive line via Pro Football Focus, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to do excellent things this season, both through the ground as well as in the pass catching game. Another pick that I'm kind of really warming up to is Chris Carson. Now, Chris Carson does have that hip injury, but still finished as a top 12 running back last year. Even if he doesn't finish top 12, I would be very hard pressed to find him not finishing as an RB2, as a very, very safe player for the Seattle Seahawks. There's really no competition behind him. Sure, they have Rashad, Pup, Penny, because this motherfucker is always hurt as well. So I would just go ahead and take Chris Carson. I feel like he's super safe. Some picks that I also like, I love Kenny Golladay. I love DJ Moore. I love Adam Thielen. I love, let's see, anyone else? I kind of like James Conner. I kind of like David Johnson. Not going to say that I love those guys, though. Picks I don't like, I do not like Odell at all. Not a big fan of Odell. I'm just not going to trust in a team that I think is going to run the ball so much with a quarterback that I don't really know I trust all that much. Now, I don't think Mayfield's a fucking bum. I don't think he's the worst quarterback to ever grace the NFL. I'm sure he's going to be fine, but I think the role he's going to be in this year will make him play much better due to the fact that he won't have to be throwing the ball as much. And if you're not throwing the ball as much and you have a guy like Jarvis Landry on your team who's legitimately sucks up the targets like a goddamn vacuum, I don't really see Odell having all that much of an opportunity in a run-heavy scheme in Cleveland. I love Allen Robinson as well. I don't like Amari Cooper. I made a video about players not to draft. Amari Cooper's on there. He's a guy who legitimately on a week-to-week basis, you have no fucking idea when to draft him. You're going to need multiple doses of Advil to have with the headache you're going to get from having to figure out if you want to start Amari Cooper or not, because you know he's a top 12 wide receiver or top 15 wide receiver when the year comes to a close, but he does that because he has good games and he has bad games, and he typically plays 16 games, which at the end of the year puts you as one of those top guys. So now it is our turn to draft at the 4.10, and then we have our 5.10 pick. We have started with 2 running backs and wide receiver. Very typical start for us. I typically try to go 2 running backs at least in the first 3 rounds, but hey, if the value wasn't there, if Aaron Jones wasn't there, I would have happily pivoted and drafted Chris Godwin and D-Hop, Chris Godwin, and someone else to go ahead and start off my team. I would not be opposed to that. That's why I say not to go into your draft with one given strategy. Please try to make sure that you have an open mind going into the draft and don't feel like you have to draft a quarterback in, say, the 7th round, or you have to draft a kicker in the 9th round or something. Don't draft a kicker or a defense early, but don't come in there putting yourself in a box of where to draft the position, because then you're going to leave the draft without any value because you're reaching up to grab another guy while there's positions at, say, wide receivers or another position that is just much more readily available and the better position to pick based on value. So if you guys have enjoyed this draft thus far for the first 3 picks of the draft, please make sure to click that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it, and I promise that I'm going to help you guys win. I try to answer every single comment. Now, I've been getting so many recently that I am like a couple hours behind, but I do always try to answer. So now looking at the board, running backs and wide receivers are looking the running backs are looking quite dry. The wide receivers are looking very scrumptious here, if you know what I'm saying. They're looking quite yummy. Shout out to Justin Bieber. So here we're probably going to go with a running back first and then go wide receiver. I like Le'Veon Bell. Now, I might be the only one who still is somewhat on Le'Veon Bell. People are talking all types of shit on him. I saw a picture of this man shirtless. This guy looks jacked. He looks like he could be a Mortal Kombat character, and he's looking good in practice. There's obviously reports, Frank Gore's going to be the running back 1. Unless Adam Gase wants to lose his job day 1, he will not start Frank Gore above him. Frank Gore will get touches, sure. Le'Veon Bell's going to get a zillion dump-offs from Sammy Mono, Sammy Kids See Ghost, who gets scared when the DBs are fucking screaming at him because the offensive line isn't all that good. But I think Le'Veon Bell will be fine. I think he has to just be more efficient than last year. You can't go from being one of the best running backs in the league to rushing for 3 point whatever a carry. I think he plays better even in a situation that isn't ideal, obviously, for Le'Veon Bell. I think he has a fine season, and drafting him inside of the 4th round, to me, seems like a complete and utter fucking steal. Most people probably hate Le'Veon Bell because last year Le'Veon Bell bent him over and slapped him in the ass a couple of times while he was doing it. Now, at wide receiver, we're here with a bunch of options, running back, or wide receivers, I should say. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, DJ Chark, Terry McLaurin, or are all solid options here. To me, the guys that have top 12 potential are all those guys, but the guys I see most likely finishing there would be Woods or Cooper Kupp. Now, on YouTube, I think I'm one of the conductors of the Robert Woods train. Choo-choo! Me and Robert Woods are just boys. I'd love to meet this guy in real life. He seems like an awesome guy. Robert Woods, awesome for fantasy football. Last season, down the stretch, after they committed to the 2 wide receiver set, this guy was tearing it up. Oh, not the 2 wide receiver set, the 2 tight end set. This guy is tearing it up. Top 5 in wide receiver points per game. He's annihilating defenses, and Cooper Kupp goes from being up there to slowly coming down, and I think that may happen again. I think Cooper Kupp's going going to be fine. I think Jared Goff loves to throw the ball to him, but I just think Robert Woods is going to finish higher in fantasy football, so that's why I'm going to draft him here at the 501 as my wide receiver number 2. So through our first 5 picks, we have Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Chris Godwin, Robert Woods, and Le'Veon Bell. So very solid start to the draft. I feel very comfortable with all of the players that are on our team. I don't feel like I took a reach at any of those spots, and that is something that is a problem with the 1 pick. If you really want a guy and say, hey, I think he might be a late 5th round pick, but I'm picking at the 501, say you really like DJ Chark, you're not going to be able to get him here likely in the 6th round, so you probably have to reach ahead and get him here, which is a problem, obviously. That's why I kind of like staying towards the middle to the end of the draft, but you also kind of have that problem if you're at the end of the draft. But the one plus of being at the beginning or at the end is you can really dictate the draft by just swinging from going from, say, a bunch of people draft wide receivers, then you hammer 2 running backs, and then people get really scared and start drafting running backs. That's just what happens. That's why runs happen at some positions. So after we draft Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp came off the board. Not very surprising. Those guys typically go around 3 or 4 picks within each other. At the 503, very surprising Mark Andrews lasted that long. Very good pick by Burton Ertzy. Shout out to him. Some random computer. Shout out to Mark Andrews. After that was Calvin Ridley, followed by Marky Mock Ingram, and Marky Mock Andrews going in the same round. Cam Akers, Raheem Mostert, Tyler Lockett, DJ Chark, baby Chark, Cortland Sutton, quarterback Dakota Prescott, then Deshaun Watson, Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, David Montgomery, DK Metcalf, and Devin Singletary at the 609. Very nice. So, a bunch of quarterbacks did end up going off the board and tight ends. You're going to be seeing that a lot with those 2 positions where someone picks a quarterback right. Lamar and Pat Mahomes went in the 3rd round. So, everyone's waiting. They're waiting round 4, round 5. No one's picked one. Everyone's like, oh, you know what? I'm sitting here pretty. No one's going to pick one. And then the 601 guy picks Dak Prescott. And then the guys around him are just like, oh, fuck. I'm not going to get the guy in the next round that I want, so I have to panic. I have to pick a quarterback, and that's why we see Watson, Russ, and Kyler all go within that round. It kind of makes sense because those guys are all in the 2nd tier at the quarterback position, and people probably don't feel that they'll fall to the 7th round, but don't hop on the run because now the other positions are much more readily available. We see kind of a mini tight end run. Obviously, it doesn't happen all together because we saw Andrews, then Ertz, then Waller, but that does not really surprise me at all, those guys going around the same spot, especially Zach Ertz and Waller. Typically, you see Andrews go a little higher, though, than the 5th round. So obviously, like I said before, some great value there. I love DK Metcalf in the 6th round, but surprisingly, Tyler Lockett has not came off the board yet, I believe. Typically, you're going to be seeing Tyler Lockett go around him, so it'd be interesting to see if Lockett goes shortly after or much later, considering I've seen Tyler Lockett go a lot of times ahead of Metcalf, which I personally believe to be the right decision. So looking now at the board, high-key lost my train of thought right there because someone came to drop off a package from FedEx, so I did kind of lose my train of thought. But here, we're going to be looking for that running back or that wide receiver. Shout out to Devin Singletary for going right before me. So that I didn't have to pick him because that guy's going to be ass because it's a running back, or not really running back by committee, because committee kind of implies more than 2 guys. It's more that double-headed dragon where it's going to be kind of fucked because Singletary is going to want to get a zillion touches, but he's not going to get it because Zach Moss is going to get a bunch of the touches. And so I'd rather just draft the guy later in Zach Moss, and then if we were to see something happen to Singletary, then Moss would be an absolute steal later. I think Moss is definitely playable in certain scenarios, especially since I believe he is going to be the guy vulturing a zillion touchdowns from Devin Singletary. So now it's time to go ahead and draft running back or wide receiver here. But to me, we're probably going to go with 1 and 1 here. I feel nasty if I didn't draft Terry McLaurin here. I love Terry McLaurin so much. I think for the Washington football team, he is really going to be a good pick. And a lot of people in some of the newer kind of leagues, or not really a new league, but people who are newer to fantasy football may not want to take a guy that's on the fucking Washington football team because they're not that good. But that has no effect on fantasy football. Some of the best fantasy players are on the worst teams in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey, very case in point. The Carolina Panthers are probably going to have less than 7 wins, maybe less than 5 wins, and he's the best player in fantasy football. So now we're going to go ahead and go running back. Now here is the choice where if you want to go safe or you're trying to go balls to the goddamn wall inside the 7th round. If you want to be safe, you go Kareem Hunt. You can play him as your flex sometimes. He'll probably get a decent amount of opportunity on a very run-heavy team, head coached by Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. You could take a risk. You'd say, fuck it, I want DeAndre Swift. I want a guy who can also do similar things to Kareem Hunt, but it's not the running back one for sure, obviously going into the season, and is coming into the season hurt. Or you can go safe again. James White, super safe for the New England Patriots with Cam Newton. Or you can go with a kind of more of a risk, but kind of a moderate pick with Ronaldo Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But obviously, Kamara could get traded, or Leonard Fournette could be picked up by that team. So you never really know what you're getting there. So I'm going to go ahead here and go with Kareem Hunt. I'm going to go ahead and get a guy that will be heavily involved in the pass-catching game for the Cleveland Browns, as well as getting a decent amount of touches, obviously, behind Nick Chubb. And while Nick Chubb has never been injured in his NFL career, if he was to get hurt, Kareem Hunt would legitimately go past Nick Chubb and potentially be a top 5 running back for fantasy football. So he's a handcuff in a way. He's a quote-unquote handcuff because, obviously, if Chubb goes down, then he's going to be great. But you can also play him when Chubb is playing, since I think they'll both get enough usage in this team to make them both very fantasy relevant this season in Cleveland. So I'll happily draft Kareem Hunt here inside of the 7th round. So after we went ahead and drafted Kareem Hunt, we have a really loaded roster. We have not drafted a quarterback or a tight end yet, though. Obviously, we do have 2 bench players and no defense and no kicker, because I don't draft a defense or a kicker until the last 2 rounds, due to the fact that I feel like if you draft a kicker or a defense early, you're supremely fucking over your team, because you could have gotten, say you pick a kicker in the 7th round, then you draft, instead of drafting Keenan Allen or Devontae Parker at wide receiver, even though I say I don't even love Devontae Parker all that much, but then you're going to end up with, maybe you draft, instead of where you got your kicker, instead of drafting him in the 14th round, you draft him here. And instead of Devontae Parker, now you have a guy who's a coin flip, whereas Devontae Parker, I feel like a couple of weeks into the season after he suffers that kind of hard schedule, will be able to be much better. So to me, I just don't really understand it. So after with Kareem Hunt, Josh Allen came out the board, followed by DeAndre Swift, Devontae Parker, Keenan Allen, Ronaldo Jones, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Jordan Howard, T.Y. Hilton, James White, Hollywood Brown, Tariq Cohen, Stephon Diggs, Michael Gallup, Will Fuller, Jarvis Landry, Tyler Boyd, and A.J. Green. So a very pretty typical wide receiver run here going later in the draft, where they loaded up on the running backs. This team has a zillion running backs. They're getting wide receivers. So these are very typical to happen inside of like the 8th round of a 10-team league. I hate A.J. Green, but he has really fallen in drafts. Like, I thought he was going to be fool's gold. He seems to be every year for the last couple of years. People draft him highly, expecting him to play the whole season when he never does. But now people are starting to catch on. He's going even later, but I think this is not even worthy of a pick inside the 8th round, considering he's already gotten hurt. It's just such a bad situation for AJ Green due to how injury prone he is as of recent. So I'm not drafting AJ Green at all. The guy's played less than half of his games in the last 4 seasons. I'm just not trying to draft a player like that. Now at quarterback, Drew Brees, Tom Brady still available. I'll probably continue to wait on the quarterback position. Since it's a 10-team league, I feel like I could find a solid one in like the 11th round. But if you notice teams start to take 2 quarterbacks in like the 8th round, then you don't even have to panic really. But you have to be cautious of that. Look around so you make sure that you're not left behind on like a quarterback train going in like the 9th round, because because multiple teams are drafting backup quarterbacks, which does happen in some home leagues. So now we're going to go ahead and dip into the running back or wide receiver core. Here at wide receiver, Julian Edelman still available, Marvin Jones, Brandon Cooks, Jamison Crowder. I don't feel like there's too much of a fall off there after this round. If I don't go running back and wide receiver, I may end up going running back and quarterback here, though, because I do feel like maybe some teams will take 2 quarterbacks. So here we're going to go with Phillip Lindsay of the Denver Broncos. I see a whole lot of upside with him. I'm not completely bought in on Melvin Gordon. I think that Melvin Gordon is going to be used in the team. Obviously, he will be the leader in touches on the team, but does he lead so much ahead of Phillip Lindsay where Phillip Lindsay is not worthy of playing? And if Melvin Gordon was to get hurt, then we could see Phillip Lindsay really step up and put in that role again. Phillip Lindsay's been over 1,000 yards in his career. He's been a running back that has been good for this team. There's a reason why him and Royce Freeman were splitting last season, because of how good Phillip Lindsay is. And Royce Freeman really wasn't all that good, but I think we see a similar split this season. It was literally a 50-50 split last season. They were both playing over 50% of the snaps for the Denver Broncos, using a decent amount of 2 running back sets if they're both playing over 50% of the snaps. So don't be surprised when Phillip Lindsay does much better than you would assume, and that Melvin Gordon does much worse than you would assume. I think Melvin Gordon's fine. I just don't think that he's going to be able to finish top 12 like some people might end up believing based upon his past. I just don't think this situation is ideal. Just like last year, the situation wasn't ideal after he held out and Austin Eckler was balling out, so they had to keep using Austin Eckler. So now we're going to go ahead and probably draft a wide receiver here and then hop back on the running back train, probably go quarterback and tight end in the next few rounds. So we're going to go ahead here and let me see, actually. I have 3 wide receivers. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running backs. So, yeah, I have to go wide receiver. So, we're going to go ahead here and take a bit of a risk and go with Brandon Cooks here of the Houston Texans. He's going to be my wide receiver 4, so I'm going to take more of a risk. Now, he's not a risk necessarily because of injury, because when he gets hurt, he comes back. The problem is the risk is that we don't know who the wide receiver 1 is there, and he's 1 concussion off of legitimately never playing in the NFL again, so that's obviously a risk. But he could be the wide receiver 1 there. He's going super late. So, honestly, at that ADP, to potentially get a wide receiver 1 on a team with Deshaun fucking Watson, I will go ahead and pay that price inside of the 9th round. So, after we went with Brandon Cooks, Marvin Jones came off the board, followed by Julian Edelman, Deontay Johnson, Marlon Mack, CeeDee Lamb, Zach Moss, Matt Breida, Jamison Crowder, J.K. Dobbins, Leonard Fournette. So, Leonard Fournette goes in the 10th round here. We have no idea where Leonard Fournette's going to get signed to, but he will get signed. So, drafting him like the 10th round actually makes a whole lot of sense, considering I feel like there's no way some team doesn't just bring him in, and he doesn't have a decent role on that team. So after Leonard Fournette, we see Evan Ingram, followed by Christian Kirk, Darius Slayton, John Brown, Sterling Shepard, Tevin Coleman, Kerryon Johnson, and Darrell Henderson. So we are back up to bat. If you guys have enjoyed this video thus far, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. So now we're going to draft Latavius Murray here. This is an easy pick now, not knowing what's going to happen to Kamara. If you're drafting today, you're drafting tomorrow before Kamara potentially gets moved, make sure you draft Latavius Murray, but don't overpay for him because there's a 100% chance, like I believe, that Alvin Kamara could still be there. But Latavius Murray's an excellent backup because if Kamara was to go down or get traded, Murray was averaging 30-plus half PPR and full PPR points per game when Kamara was down for the count when he was hurt last season. So this situation for this team is really, it's just so easy to plug and play a running back due to the system that Sean Payton has created. So I think Latavius Murray is definitely a late pick that's good, but he has no value at all unless Kamara was to get hurt or to end up getting traded off of the team. So now we're going to go ahead and draft a quarterback here. We're going to go ahead and draft between Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Let me know who you guys prefer down below in the comments, TB12 or Drew Brees. Obviously, we're in the old motherfucker range of quarterbacks where you're stuck between 2 old motherfuckers in Tom Brady and Drew Brees. Personally, I think Brady is going to have the better season. I have them ranked back-to-back in my rankings, both top 12 guys. So I think you could really go either way here. Since I have them back-to-back, I'm not too confident in one finishing ahead of the other. They're in the same tier for me. So I'm going to go ahead here and draft Tampa Bay, Tom Brady. But I won't be surprised if Drew Brees finished ahead of him. So that's just kind of my overall feel on that. Let me know how you guys feel. Maybe you're more confident on Tampa Bay Tom, or maybe you're more confident on Drew Brees, or maybe you're kind of in the middle, just like how I am. So a huge tight end run ended up happening there, so I'm not going to end up getting Hayden Hurst in this draft, which is A-okay because there's guys that I like later, and I might just fuck around and do something different to what I normally do, because that's what you got to experiment with in mock drafts. So after when Tampa Bay, Tom Brady, Sony Michel came off the board, followed by Anthony Miller, Deebo Samuel, Tyler Higbee, Preston Williams, Adrian Peterson, Alexander Madison, Chase Edmonds, and Jalen Reagor closes out the 11th round. Reagor surprisingly going a bit early, considering I feel like he's going to miss a decent amount of time to start the season, maybe a couple of weeks. After that, we see Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Noah Fant, Hayden Hurst, Rock Armstead, Damian Harris, and Jerry Jeudy. So a lot of tight ends going later, since many people wait for later on the tight ends. Now here we're going to do something a bit different. I typically say don't draft 2 tight ends, don't draft 2 quarterbacks, but in this scenario, I'm going to go ahead here and snag Gronk because I have Tom Brady. So I'm going to play him week 1. And until he gets hurt, because I think Gronk will be good, I just worry that he ends up getting hurt. And then we're going to snag a tight end for our bench and pick up Mr. Jonnu Smith, who I think definitely has top 8 potential in the playoffs. We saw Jonnu Smith get a lot more involved in this Tennessee Titans offense. I think this year they may try to throw the ball a little bit more, and that is going to bode very well for Jonnu Smith. So now I am just stuck with my last 2 picks, which is obviously a kicker and a defense. In some leagues, you don't even have to draft a kicker and a defense. I could just pick up a bunch of running backs and wide receivers. But normally, I don't even prefer to do that. I just like to snag my defense and kicker in the draft, even though that is kind of a pro strategy to not draft a kicker and a defense and then cut them, obviously, before Sunday's kickoff. So after we went with Jonnu Smith, Antonio Gibson came off the board, followed by Tony Pollard, McCole Hardman, Duke Johnson, Keshawn Vaughn, Boston, Scott, Naheem Hines, A.J. Dillon, Justin Jefferson, a bunch of kickers, and a bunch of defenses. So first here, we're going to go ahead and get our kicker. We're going to go with Robbie Gould of the San Francisco 49ers, and then we're going to go with the defense playing a sus offense week 1, and they're not really that sus because they're the Bengals, but it's the first game ever Joe Burrow is going to play in the NFL with no preseason. I'm sure he'll fuck up slightly and make a couple of bad decisions, get sacked, all those kind of things. That bodes well for the defense. And the defense you're getting is the LA Chargers, who's one of the better defenses in the league, even though now they're kind of suffering some injuries. So now to recap our team, we had quarterback Tom Brady. Our running backs are Christian McCaffrey and Aaron Jones. Our wide receiver core is Chris Godwin and Robert Woods. Our tight end is Rob Gronkowski. Our flex is Le'Veon Bell. Our defense is the Chargers. Our kicker is Robbie Gould. Our bench is comprised of Scary Terry McLaurin, Scorin McLaurin for the Washington football team, Kareem Hunt, Philip Lindsey, Brandon Cooks, Latavius Murray, and Jonnu Smith. So thank you guys all for watching this video. If at any point you ended up enjoying, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure that you have a great rest of your guys' day. Check out the Patreon as well. I love you all, and I'll see you motherfuckers tomorrow with a bunch more videos. I love you all, guys. Please make sure to stay safe out there. If you guys are ever in trouble, you don't feel good, you feel like you need to talk to someone, always make sure to hit me up on Twitter at NotoriousFNTSY. I love you all. Stay safe. Goodbye.